remember that when I came to Brussels, my first time in one of these old trams, it's like, okay, why the doors are not opening? And I was trying to find, touching the whole tram, trying to find a button, but actually you had to push right in the middle of these old doors for them to open. I mean, it's like, how can you know these things? Unfortunately, it still happens in Europe. There is still 1.4 million persons with disabilities who live in this kind of separate residential settings. So we are all citizens, but for example, there are still 12 member states in the EU in which persons with disabilities, certain persons with disabilities, cannot vote. They don't have the right to vote, or they don't have the right to stand as candidates. There are 13 member states in which persons with disabilities can be sterilized against their will or without being informed about it.
Welcome to Coeurtisol, the podcast that puts you in the shoes of an MEP and where you can vote on policy proposal and express your opinions on topics that raise your cortisol level and are close to your heart. Today we welcome Alejandro Moledo del Rio. He is the European Disability Forum Deputy Director and Head of Policy, and he leads and coordinates EDF's advocacy and policy work at the EU level, and supports the work of the European Parliament Disability Intergroup. Among other areas, Mr. Moledo has developed policy position and recommendation regarding political participation of persons with disabilities, accessible information and communication technologies, assistive technologies, and different standardization activities. Mr. Moledo is also member of the Spanish Blind Organization, for which he worked as a journalist and regional representative of young, visually impaired people inside the organization. That's a very impressive CV. So, Alejandro, thank you so much for welcoming me at EDF's office. I want to start with a very basic question. How are you feeling today?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me in your video podcast. It's a great pleasure, and I'm feeling good. I feel all right. I think when we are recording this episode is beginning of September, so we are in this kind of mood that we are waiting for the stress to come towards us. Yes. But for the moment, we have everything under control, so everything is fine.
Exactly, and we're still relaxed from summer holidays.
Exactly.
So that's perfect. Alejandro, you are with us today as we're going to tackle the topic of persons with disabilities, inclusivity, accessibility. And for me, it was very important to tackle this topic in this podcast because the lack of accessibility is something that really tends to raise my cortisol level. And I think it's not only my case, it's for most people. I have a tendency to observe the infrastructures of a city, comparing the neighborhood. And already as a person without disabilities, I find a lot of places narrow, not accessible. I see cars and scooters that are parked in a way that it's hindering, the way. So can I start with a personal question and ask you, what is the thing that irritates you the most as a person with a visual impairment?
Well, actually, you said one of them. I really hate when people place things on the pavement, like scooters, the rubbish, or when there are works that are not properly signed or protected, so people cannot fall, or the lack of lighting as well. I mean, the built environment in our city, and we are talking particularly about Brussels, is really appalling. It's really appalling and really gets on my nerves. This lack of basic respect to others. So yeah, that would be one that really stresses me out very much. Particularly at night is when I kind of feel it. I feel more unprotected because I use my cane only by night, also because of this lack of lighting or this not very strategic lighting that our city has sometimes. That really makes me, okay, I need to be very careful. I need to go with the cane and so forth. Other things that really really raises my cortisol levels are, lack of accessibility in transportation as well. That is also something that upsets me very much, when the buses don't have the audible signal telling the next stop, or when you need, I mean, you don't know how to, for example, open a tram doors. I remember that when I came to Brussels, my first time in one of these old trams, it's like, okay, why the doors are not opening? And I was trying to find, touching the whole tram, trying to find a button, but actually you had to push right in the middle of these old doors for them to open. I mean, it's like, how can you know these things? So these things, and then in the digital domain, for example, something that I really, really hate, and unfortunately the commission does so sometimes when they reply to our letters, is those PDFs that are just a scan or an image of a letter. I mean, come on. I mean, PDFs are digital documents, as you know, that the purpose is that you cannot edit them. But I mean, nowadays it's a little bit easier to make them accessible, but sometimes you feel like, okay, there is no intention to make this document readable. And that really raises also my cortisol, like inaccessible websites as well, or inaccessible apps that suddenly something pops up and breaks your navigation in the website. I mean, there are these kind of things that are kind of basic knowledge on facilitating the usability of a website, which or a mobile application or a digital document, that if people would think, okay, let's develop this, or let's design this website or this app or this document in the most usable way, that will already facilitate the accessibility, because they go hand in hand. But sometimes it's like there is no consideration. They just, okay, we just take a picture of the PDF and send it like that, and we send an invitation like that. Instead of putting the information in an email, we just send a APG image, and people will read it in the photo that we just took. I mean, it's just very basics that really makes our life more difficult. Every time you send an email and you want to, if you include information in an image, please make sure to include that information in the body of the email. That's super basic. It will facilitate the readability by anyone. Somebody that is reading your email in a smartphone, for example, is just easier than an image that you need to open, then enlarge and all that. So it's also, I mean, we always say that accessibility is crucial for us, for persons with disabilities, but it's beneficial to all. I mean, we see it in the built environment, like families with trolleys, or I mean, we notice these very basics, or subtitles that now everybody uses to be able to watch videos in the metro or something. I mean, we know that accessibility benefits everyone. So
yeah, absolutely. Then I wanted to ask you, because the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities defines persons with disabilities as those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. I wanted to ask you if you agree with this definition, which seemed pretty complete, or if you would personalize it a bit, if you could.
No, I fully agree with the definition. I think it sets the foundations of a human rights model towards persons with disabilities. In the past, persons with disabilities were treated more like objects. So others were deciding for them on what is best and so forth. So it was, and others were concerned about healing persons with disabilities. It's about this. This is kind of the medical model of disability. Very paternalistic, very
Savior,
charities. Yeah, exactly. Then society evolved, thankfully, and we moved to a more social model of disability in which the focus was put not on the person but on the society and on the barriers that the society was creating that were preventing persons with disabilities from enjoying, I don't know, transportation, as we were discussing, for example. And then with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, they took those models, the medical model and the social model, and they progressed into the human rights based model, which is what this definition is all about. It's about acknowledging that the person has an impairment, a long-term impairment, acknowledging that society creates barriers, and this intersection of the impairment and the barriers hinders the participation on equal footing with others. So that final part of the definition, on equal footing with others, and the verb participation is what makes this definition, in my point of view, very comprehensive, because you put the focus on equality, on equal access, on being equally able to participate in society. Mm-hmm. So that's why I agree with this definition.
Perfect. We can find on the website of the European Commission that around 100 million people in the EU have some form of disability. Mm-hmm. I saw a couple of other figures, like only half of persons with disabilities are employed, more than 28% of persons with disabilities are at risk of poverty or social exclusion. And 52% of persons with disabilities feel discriminated against. Mm-hmm. We are in 2024. What are the main factors, according to you, that still prevent persons with disabilities in the EU to have the same opportunities, whether it is at school, in workplace, accessing infrastructures, products, services?
Well, even with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that has been ratified, it's a human rights treaty that has been ratified not only by all member states of the EU, but also by the EU itself as the first kind of supranational organization that has signed it and incorporated it into the legal framework. We, as you know, as the figures show, we are still a long way to really achieve inclusion, and the factors are, I think, it's a variety of factors, starting with the legacy, the legacy of how we were 10, 20, 50, 100 years ago, and also which obviously in the past there was no consideration for persons with disabilities. They were not, let's say, in the map. They were kind of basically left at home or segregated in specific residential institutions. That unfortunately still happens in Europe. There is still 1.4 million persons with disabilities who live in this kind of separate residential settings. And even if we had and we are achieving some progress in the law, let's say, in the legal framework, we still see that, and we see as well that society is more and more inclusive and more welcoming towards persons with disabilities. We see that there are still attitudinal barriers as well. Mm-hmm. As for persons with disabilities, there is this kind of double standard as for persons with disabilities that you can notice in certain areas, even the most basic ones. So we are all citizens, but for example, there are still 12 member states in the EU in which certain persons with disabilities cannot vote. They don't have the right to vote, or they don't have the right to stand as candidates. There are 13 member states in which persons with disabilities can be sterilized against their will or without being informed about it. So this kind of human rights violation still happen because the perception of persons with disabilities for certain people remain in this kind of, okay, we need to decide for them, we need to take care of their interests, but we are the ones deciding. And these kind of attitudinal barriers are also present in employment, in education, as you said, because there is kind of an unrealistically low expectation as for what a person with disability can achieve at work, at school, and so forth. And sometimes we face even this kind of double worrying approach towards persons with disabilities. Either certain people think that, okay, you're a hero because you have a disability and you can have a normal life. Or, okay, if a disabled person can do it, so can I. I mean, sometimes we see this around the Paralympics and so forth, but thankfully this narrative is fading out, thankfully. So we have that kind of damaging inspirational narrative. And then you have the opposite, like, oh, poor you have a disability, let me help you. So we need to remove this kind of narrative from our society. And inclusion is a matter of acknowledging human diversity. And with persons with disabilities, it's challenging, and I understand that it's challenging because we are very, very diverse. We are the most heterogeneous group within kind of the minority groups, as we are sometimes called. So understanding that humankind is so diverse is difficult. It takes time. We are working on it, and society needs to work on it, but it's a path that we need to take. And that means investments in understanding that, for example, as we were talking before, when you are designing something, you need to design such thing for the greatest number possible of people.
Yep.
So that takes time and takes efforts and takes investments as well.
I saw that each year there is an Access City Awards recognizing European cities for their efforts to make themselves more accessible, either for persons with disabilities or and older citizens. I think it's a good initiative, but at the same time, I cannot prevent myself of also thinking, shouldn't we punish the cities that are not inclusive enough?
You know, I had that idea as well. I kind of proposed it as a joke to the team. Maybe we should create the anti-access award. Like, you know, there is the Oscars and the anti-Oscars. I think there is an anti-Oscar award. Yeah. But I mean, you know, how the EU works, and naming and shaming is not a strategy for the EU to do. So if an organization goes and gives such an award, such an embarrassing award, I will be happy to read the results and even to contribute on a personal basis. But I mean, I think, no, jokes aside, I think it's best to award the efforts, the positive efforts done the people or the cities or the organizations that do not want to progress.
But don't you think that, for example, by hitting them in the wallet, so where it hurts the most, it would really accelerate the efforts?
I think that's something that we should explore at a, let's say, policy level, because we see that, for example, we have public procurement legislation. Okay, so when a public authority decides to buy a new building, a new website, a new service, and so forth, accessibility is an obligation there. In the EU directive on public procurement, accessibility is an obligation. It should be considered in the technical specifications of the public of the tender. But the reality is that then you see new buildings, new metros, new tram, new trains being just procured by the public authorities, and they are not accessible. And say, how come? But the problem is that then you cannot hit them on the pocket, because citizens, we don't have the mechanisms, a redress mechanism to go and say, and to challenge a decision like, why did you spend everybody's money on a train that is not accessible. That possibility is not there. I mean, you would need to take to the court and so forth, but this is not a system that we have in Europe. This may work, and it does work very much in the US, for example, but in Europe we don't do we are not so prone to go to the court and fight a public administration that easily. But to establish certain mechanisms to challenge and to hit on the pocket on public administrations or private organizations when they don't comply with the laws we have in place, I think that's necessary. We need to strengthen enforcement in the laws that we have, because we have very good laws, but then if they are not respected, what do we do?
Yeah, exactly. It's a matter of concrete implementation. We saw that Ursula von der Leyen, during her speech to become again president of the European Commission, didn't mention the topic of disability as a priority in her speech. Is it worrying for you?
Yes, it is. It was equally worrying and disappointing, because she did mention other grounds, and we were very happy to see, you know, the renewal of the LGBTIQ strategy, the gender equality, a new strategy on anti-poverty. I mean, all of that we are very eager to contribute as well, and to bring the disability perspective into those strategies as well. But we were surprised that persons with disabilities were not mentioned, not even once in her speech, and they were not included at all, not even once in the political guidelines, because we do have a European disability strategy from 21 to 2030, but that strategy only includes actions until 24, until this year. So what happens with the second half of the strategy? We need the European Commission, and we would have expected to see this in the political guidelines, that there was a commitment to update the strategy with actions and flagship initiatives to fill the gaps for the second half of its life. But yeah, we are worried, but we hope that in the mission letter to the Commissioner for Equality, which was confirmed by von der Leyen, we will see there, as it was in 2019, the responsibility to implement the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And we hope to see in this mission letter the commitment to update as well the disability strategy.
Very good. We hope that the message is clear.
I hope so.
Over the last year, still to have a positive note, we observed important legislation adopted. So the European Accessibility Act, regulations on the rights of passengers with reduced mobility, Web Accessibility Directive, EU Disability Card, and also recently the EU Parking Card. According to you, what should be the next priority at the political agenda when it comes to improving the lives of persons with disabilities?
There are many things. I mean, the most important one, and the key political message, as I just said, is to ensure that the Commission will update the European Disability Strategy with further actions and flagship initiatives, as they call it. A flagship initiative was, for example, the legislation to establish the European Disability Card and the European Parking Card, which has been a long-standing demand of the disability movement. I mean, we've been calling for this legislation for, I think, over 13, 14 years. And finally now it's a reality, and it was adopted in time record. So this proves that when there is a clear roadmap, like a strategy, sometimes strategy, we kind of underestimate the power of a strategy because it's not binding and so forth, but it kind of keeps the political leadership in the Commission accountable. Okay, you have this set of actions that you promise and you need to deliver. And because it's not the same to come and say, okay, I'm the Commissioner for Equality and I will work on disability and I will make sure that inclusion is everywhere in Europe, blah, 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 blah. But what are the key actions that you will take? So having a strategy is important, and this is our key political message right now, until we see that the Commission will for sure update the strategy with further actions and initiatives. And as for these actions and initiatives, we have many proposals that were taken from our manifesto before the European elections. Basically, we believe that we need to ensure that everybody has the right to vote in Europe. So there is a proposal for a new European electoral law to ensure that everybody, all persons with disability, regardless of your legal capacity status, because this deprivation of the right to vote happens mostly to people with intellectual or psychosocial disabilities, is completely removed. So we have the right to vote in all member states. There is also the revision of passengers' rights. At the moment, still in Europe, Europe and worldwide, an airline can deny boarding of a person with disability just for on the basis of their disability because of safety reasons. Or if they break your wheelchair, they would only consider it as a luggage, and they will compensate with 1,200 approximately euros, where the wheelchair can cost up to hundreds of thousands of euros sometimes. So this situation is still happening in Europe. So like to tackle these kind of flagrant violations of human rights and fundamental rights, such as the right to vote, the ban on forced sterilization that still happens in 13 member states, as I mentioned before, the ensuring mobility and accessibility, so the air passengers' rights that I was mentioning, but also ensuring that the train infrastructure as well, so train stations and vehicles are accessible across Europe, so there is some kind of interoperability, and people can have spontaneous travels by train, because that's not the case today. There is also the gaps of the disability card, because the disability card is great because with your disability card you can go to another member states, and if you go to a museum or a theater and they have a discount or a specific adaptation for persons with disabilities, locals with disabilities, you as a card holder, let's say as a person with a disability and the European disability card, they should allow you the same kind of preferential treatment as locals in that country. But what happens if you move, as it was my case, to another member state to work or to study? Then your disability disappears. I mean, it's really surprising that in the EU still that we have this principle and this value of freedom of movement. This is not guaranteed for persons with disabilities, because when you move to another member state, you need to go through, and you want to establish yourself in another member state, as it was my case, for work, you need to start over from the beginning. You need to reassess your disability from the very beginning. And I can tell you my personal story. When I came to Belgium, my reasonable accommodation for my work was just to have a bigger screen back then. So I only needed a bigger screen. So I went through the procedure to get the public authority to fund a bigger screen. And I had to go through, because they didn't accept my certificate from Spain, so I had to go through the disability assessment. And so that took months, obviously, maybe 6 months. And then when I received the confirmation, okay, you have a disability. Okay, I knew, but thank you for confirming this. We will pay the screen. I said, okay, great. And that year, because the story has a final twist, that year I ticked the box of a person with disability in the tax declaration. And then I received a letter from the Belgian government telling me, we don't have any proof that you have a disability. And I said, how come? You just paid a screen. So I sent them the certificate, and they said, yeah, but this is the Francophone community. You need to go through this disability assessment again in order.
Oh no.
So I have my disability certified 3 times.
Oh wow. In 3 languages, I guess?
Well, no, one's in Spanish and 2 in French.
But 2 in French still?
Yeah, because one is the French community and the other one was the federal state.
Oh wow,
yeah.
Okay. That's a specificity to Belgium with all this administrative...
Yeah, no, it's kind of a funny anecdote, and I'm sure maybe I did something wrong and so forth. But I mean, imagine somebody with a let's say, a disability that requires higher support,
Yeah, absolutely.
then you cannot move to another state to study or to work permanently, because then you lose your disability allowance, your support services. For example, if you need personal assistance or if you need sign language interpretation, then when you move to another member state, you need to start over and to request it again. So we believe that there is a gap in the disability card, because the member states, they basically excluded this on social protection, that should be tackled by the European Commission, and to really facilitate that everybody has the opportunity to move freely, because that's not the case for persons with disabilities, unfortunately.
Yeah, but even I was thinking about your personal case, like 6 months without the adapted screen. It's a very long time.
Yeah.
Wow. But thank you very much for sharing this personal anecdotes. It was very interesting to hear. Now, actually, I move to the viewers, because it's the time for them to vote for, against, or abstain. So I remind the principle. Now it's time for viewers to vote on a policy proposal related to the topic, as a member of the European Parliament would vote. And I noted down several of the priorities you mentioned. And I would like to actually put to the vote of the viewers the ban on forced sterilization. Are you in favor of the ban on forced sterilization? And of course, you can vote through the comment section on YouTube, but also on the Instagram account. And please also explain why you decided to vote for, against, or to abstain. Alejandro, thank you for answering all the questions. We arrive at the end of the exchange, but before that, we arrive at the decortisol moment. What is that? So you have 3 paper birds, yellow, red, green, and you have to pick one of them first.
Okay, I pick,
which color do you prefer? Yellow,
red.
Okay. And then I'm gonna, it's the kind of things we were doing at school when we were kids. I mean, at least in my school, I know in France we were doing it. And now you have to give me a number between 1 and 10.
7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you have between green, blue, another type of green, and pink.
Okay, let's go for pink.
Pink. Pink is the question number 23. And the question number 23 is, if you had a time machine, would you rather travel to the future or to the past?
Good one. I guess to the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular reasons? You are curious about what will happen?
Yes.
The kind of new things coming up?
Exactly.
Yeah.
To know if we should still have hope or not.
No, we should. We should. We always should.
If I travel, I see something, I will not share it. Something bad, I will not share it.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. Thanks everyone for watching, and also don't forget to think before you click, because we are all human beings behind the screen, so it's very important to stay kind and benevolent. And yeah, I would just like to thank you again and to tell you, see you soon on Coeurtisol.